Hello and welcome to TheLines.com preview of the 2024 NFL season. Matt Brown, Stephen Andress coming to you. We will talk every single NFL team as we head into kickoff. And Stephen, maybe no team outside of the Texans is getting more buzz and more steam this offseason than the Green Bay Packers. And they go out, they give Jordan Love a massive contract despite only 1 year of sample size of him playing well. And with that, at least you better hope, actually, I should say, that you have your quarterback of the future. You at least think you have your quarterback of the future locked in. But honestly, outside of the Texans, I don't know if there has been a team that has been more hyped than what we're getting from this Green Bay Packers team.
It makes sense. The second half of the year, they looked phenomenal. But you have to dig deep into why they were phenomenal. We all have fresh in our minds that they came this close from beating the 49ers in a playoff game until they blew, a 10-point lead and allowed the Niners to storm back in the fourth quarter. So there is rightfully a lot of optimism with the Packers, but when we're handicapping these teams, Matt, we need to look deeper. We need to look at schedule. We need to look at why they were as successful as they were down the stretch in the regular season and how likely that is to be repeated given that the schedule is different this year. And I think we're going to answer some of those questions here.
Yeah, you take a look at this team and, I guess if we're talking about stability, your head coach been there 5 years. So, you're good with all of that. It will be the same offensive coordinator from last year. You don't have to worry about that. New defensive coordinator, but we're from an offensive standpoint, that seems where everybody's focusing on this team right now. They bring in Josh Jacobs after losing Aaron Jones. Josh Jacobs, certainly a back that we have seen produced at a very high level despite the fact not playing for a really good team. The Raiders were not very good and haven't been very good for a good while now, Steven. So you bring in a back that we'll see if he's got anything left in the tank. Xavier McKinney at safety comes in as well. Not a lot of other offseason real big acquisitions for this Packers team. You get an offensive tackle in the first round of the NFL draft. You get a linebacker and a safety in the second round of the draft. So you start to address what's going on the defensive side of the ball in the second round. You get your running back in the third in Marshawn Lloyd. We'll talk about what we think maybe some upside for him could possibly be. Get another linebacker there in the third round, as well as safety in the fourth. So you can see a lot of defensive stuff addressed within the draft for this team as well.
With the defensive coordinator, they get Jeff Hafley over from Boston College, but this guy has not been an NFL coach since 2018. Stops at Ohio State as a coordinator and head coach at Boston College. So I think there's a complete unknown whether or not this is going to be an upgrade or not. That is a big issue for me with this defense because as good as the offense was the second half of the year last year, they were doing it despite the defense. This defense was outside the top 20 in EPA and success rate, both for the entire season and if you look at when they got hot the last 8 weeks. And that was despite facing a schedule of quarterbacks that included Desmond Ridder, Justin Fields, Jimmy Garoppolo, Russell Wilson, Brett Rippon, Kenny Pickett, Tommy DeVito, Jaron Hall, and Bryce Young. They couldn't finish top 20 defensively in those advanced metrics despite those quarterbacks. That's a big issue for me. And Sharp Football's projecting that this will now be the number one toughest schedule of opposing offenses in the entire NFL this year. So while their units are pretty much ranked above average, maybe even top 10, if you look at the front seven and the D-line and the secondary, the talent hasn't matched the results at this point, and it's getting a lot tougher this year going into 2024.
Kansas City Chiefs, San Francisco 49ers, Baltimore Ravens, Detroit Lions, Buffalo Bills, Cincinnati Bengals, Philadelphia Eagles, Houston Texans, and then the Green Bay Packers as far as Super Bowl odds. So, yes, even shorter than the Dallas Cowboys, who we know people out there think pretty highly of. 19-1, the best number that you're going to find in the market out there for the Packers to take it all down. If you look at the schedule, Stephen, you start to say, okay, right off the bat, game against the Eagles, that's certainly something that you probably are just chalking up as a loss. Road game against the Eagles, first game of the year.
No. Brazil.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Road game regardless. Yes. Road game regardless in Brazil. There, you're probably looking at that as a loss. But then you get into a stretch in which if you're going to be a Packer backer, you need them to take advantage of the Colts, Titans, Vikings, Rams, Cardinals stretch, which you get weeks 2 through 6. So right there, Stephen, you look and you say, okay, me personally, anyone that watches our content, I'm a little bit higher on the Rams this year, and I think most people are. But do I think the Packers should be better? Yes, I do think that. I know that some people are higher on the Colts. I think you maybe are a little bit higher on the Colts maybe than market, but you probably look at the Packers as better as well. So you see those 2 games, and then Titans, Vikings, and Cardinals mentally. You're as the Packers, you're thinking those are all wins right there. So even if you lose that opening game to this Eagles squad, you could be heading into a Week 7 matchup against Houston, riding a 5-game win streak and sitting at 5-1.
Sure, yeah, and listen, this is why I think the win total might be attractive to me, where we at least get ourselves in a good position going into that Houston game, and at that point, if you want to reevaluate and maybe come back in and potentially middle, you can talk about that at that point. Yeah. Like you like to always say, make a note in your calendar to double check at that point. If you look at the schedule, they have 7 games right now where they are 3-point favorites or bigger. So they're projected to win 7 games on their schedule. They have 10 other games where it's a toss-up, inside 3 either way. They have 0 games where they're projected to lose. So if they take care of business in those 7 games where they're field goal or bigger favorites and just split the other 10 toss-up games, well, you're already at 12 wins, and the win total is over 9.5 minus 138 right now. You can get plus money at over 10.5. So from a regular season standpoint, based on what their market rating is right now, and despite my concerns with the defense, I have a lot of respect for the offense. I think you can pile up wins pretty well here. If we extend the conversation to Super Bowl prospects, that's where I need to get a little bit more just pessimistic about this team.
Yeah, I think if you look at this, and like I said, so there are a couple of teams that I'm just willing to be wrong about. And I think I talked about the Jets being one of those teams, and I think the Packers are probably the other likely contender that I'm willing to be wrong about, because I look at the team, Stephen, like we have seen 1-year sample sizes out of players before all the time where they go out and ball out, and then teams get a whole year's worth of film against them. They start breaking down your tendencies. They start seeing what you like to do and what and like we've seen guys struggle, after having really good years. And I'm not saying that Jordan Love's going to do that. I'm just saying like everybody's just crowning him like this is just an automatic that he's going to be great. And
the
he's going to be
MVP
good.
Price is ridiculous. Like
yes.
Some of the names he's above are ridiculous.
And so I'm not saying he's not going to be as good as everybody's saying. I'm just saying like the fact that I think we're getting a little ahead of ourselves here by just saying like, oh yeah, I mean look what he did last year. We've got a lot of good 1-year sample sizes out of players before to only have them kind of come back down to earth in year 2. So it's interesting for me to see. Let's not forget. I mean, and like people are going to laugh when I say this, but like let's not forget, Stephen. I mean like. People were talking about Gardner Minshew being like, remember like Gardner Minshew came in, took the nobody knew what was going on with him. No one had tape on him. No one was reviewing. Gardner Minshew had a great half a season. Everyone's like, oh, Gardner Minshew. It's Gardner Minshew. And then we realized what Gardner Minshew is. Now, again, I'm not saying it's apples to apples. I'm not saying that Jordan Love is Gardner Minshew, but I'm saying in recent memory, we've had quarterbacks come in and have a lot of success and then kind of come back down to earth once teams settle in a little bit. And the other thing is I do worry a little bit about the wide receiver room. And I understand you have a lot of good receivers, but I don't think you have any great receiver. And so between Dobbs and Reed and Watson, sure, I think that you've got 3 really good 2s. I think you have 3 really good 2s. And a lot of teams would kill for 3 really, really good 2s. I just don't know if you actually have a 1.
So your point's well taken about small sample size, and I know you're not saying Jordan Love might be Gardner Minshew.
Right, that's not what I was just trying to refresh people's memory.
Right,
you remember Minshew Mania? Yeah, that was a thing. And then Gardner Minshew became Gardner Minshew.
Yeah, but let me put some more numbers behind the point you're making here, because I do think it's well taken. Last 8 weeks of the year last year, Jordan Love was 2nd and 3rd in EPA and success rate. At least this whole offense was. And if you look at the individual quarterback metrics, Jordan Love was top 3 in the NFL right there with Brock Purdy, with Kyle Shanahan leading him, and Dak Prescott and the amazing passing that he did in the regular season. So in terms of, CPOE plus EPA composite, success rate. Like Jordan Love was in the elite tier in the second half of the year last year. And there were some other things that go along with this. You know, Matt LaFleur's scripting did a complete 180 from first half of the year to second half of the year. They went from bottom 5 in the first 15 plays of a game to top 5. They went from dead last in punt rate in the first 3 drives of the game, first half of the year, to the second best in the league in punt rate in their first 3 drives. So, and the other thing here too is there might be negative, there surely will be negative regression with how often they scored touchdowns when they got the goal to go. They were a 95% touchdown rate when they got the goal to go situations. That just wasn't number 1 in the league. That was the best of any team for as far back as records go, back to 2000. So surely they won't score as many touchdowns. I mean, Aaron Rodgers led this offense. They only had a 50% touchdown rate. So I'm caught between negative regression when you hear things like that, especially with a young quarterback with only a half season of good football. But I'm also acknowledging that this was the youngest team in the NFL, Matt. And
true.
They take another step forward. They get another year older. I think they have 4 solid wide receivers, even if one of them doesn't turn out to be a true number 1. They had a ton more explosive plays in the second half of the year. If Christian Watson's on the field, he's a human explosive play. If he gets injured, it seems like the NFL film grinding community is obsessed with Dontavian Wicks, so we'll see what happens with him. But I'm kind of caught in the middle with this offense where I think there will be regression, but also there should be improvement with being the youngest team in the league last year.
Yeah, and going along with that youngest team in the league last year, where I think that this team could surprise and could certainly be better than what I was talking about, is just the fact that this offensive line is very young. There isn't a guy that has more than 3 years experience on this offensive line. They're going to start a rookie at right guard. But the thing is, Stephen, is like typically we see offensive linemen about year 3 kind of take that next step if they're going to take the next step, right? Like so therein lies the kind of the bugaboo here when you're grading this Packers offensive line, because you got 3 different guys that are hitting that kind of window where when you really start to figure out the league and you really start to kind of settle in the offensive line, that would be this year for some of these guys, right? And so that said, there are some of these offensive linemen that we wait on, and they never really take that next step. They just stay kind of average, right? And so I wonder if that could end up being a problem here for the Packers, because it's not like the offensive line is bad. It's just average, right? It's just meaning all the guys across the board are just kind of average. They're just kind of there. Now, they take that next step, we could be talking about, oh, wow, Jordan Love has forever to throw. He's got these wide receivers like you're talking about. Look at him lighting up all these people because, look at all the athleticism, yada, yada, yada. Or it's going to be a team that on any given Sunday, because the offensive line is just okay, some days they show up and he's protected and everything's fine, and then some days they don't, and Jordan Love is getting sacked left and right, pressured all over the place, and he's not allowed to do what he is at best at doing. So again, I think that is a big, big question mark here, and one that I'm saying the upside could make this team much, much better. And then if it just kind of stays the same, then I think we need to at least temper expectations a tad, because no quarterback can be as good as their talent is whenever they don't have an offensive line. Just look at Joe Burrow.
Yeah, I hope LaFleur lets Love cook, because with what this offensive line is best at, it's not run blocking. This was an offensive line that has a left tackle in Rasheed Walker, who's a former 7th rounder, who was only the 44th graded offensive tackle by PFF last year. They drafted a tackle in the first round to try and help with that, but they were number 2 in pass block win rate a year ago, only 16th in run block win rate. And you're replacing Aaron Jones, like you mentioned, with Josh Jacobs, who was near the bottom of all running backs in efficiency metrics last year. And the Las Vegas offensive line, believe it or not, had a higher run blocking grade a season ago than Green Bay did. So if LaFleur gets too conservative and wants to run the ball too much, well, now you're going to put Jordan Love in tougher yards to go for a first down situation here. So I hope he stays aggressive, especially on first downs, because that's potentially an area where a lot of pressure gets put on Jordan Love. And secondly, with how skeptical I am of this defense overall, that could be another area where a lot of pressure is put on Jordan Love to be an elite quarterback. So that's where I get concerns about the ceiling of this team.
Yeah, player prop standpoint, we talked about some of the guys that we really like along the way. It's impossible for me to recommend anything on any of these wide receivers because we don't know the true role of these guys. And Stephen, we might not know the true role of these guys until a few games into the season. Now, one of the things that is a benefit of the new era of sports betting and these new era of sports books is they dynamically price these year-long props up until about week 10 or whatever. So like you can actually still get in on a lot of these props like up until well after the midpoint of the season. And so it might take you 2 or 3 weeks to understand who becomes the alpha there in the wide receiver core. Or, Steven, maybe there isn't one and you go in and the under is the play on every one of these dudes because in any given week it's Dobbs, in any given week it's Reed, any given week it's Watson. Like you just said, they still have Wicks, who maybe he works his way into all of that. So like, I think that that's one of those deals too, where I don't think anybody is like playable from a prop betting standpoint because we have no idea what the target share is going to be for any of these guys.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a wait and see if you're in fantasy drafts or best ball. I've been taking a ton of Dontavian Wicks because he's the cheapest one.
Yeah.
And it seems like a lot of football film grinders who are smarter than me see untapped upside with him in a way that may not be there for some of the other guys. So, just take the cheapest one and roll the dice. And if you're in a season long, it doesn't work out, you just cut them and you only cost you like 11th or 12th round pick. But in terms of season long props here, like how do you bet overs on any of these receivers at this point? Like you can only look under because they might not just play a full complement of snaps the entire season, even when they're healthy. So that's kind of where I'm at, Matt. Even with, the running back situation, LaFleur likes to rotate backs. Jacobs isn't efficient. A.J. Dillon seems to be the backup right now over the rookie that they drafted, Marshawn Lloyd, who's dealing with a hamstring. So, and we mentioned Jordan Love's MVP odds. Like he's priced shorter than Lamar Jackson, who has 2 MVPs.
The steam has just gotten out of control with that. I mean, there's just, and again, like I think people. So I've been accused on Twitter of being like a Packer hater and like a Jordan Love hater and all this. Like, no, like we're doing all of this stuff based off of odds, Steve. Like we're betting this. So like I just look and I go, at 19-1, a team that is literally like 8th on the board as far as Super Bowl odds. I have a lot more questions about the Packers than I have about the Chiefs, the Niners, the Ravens, the Lions, the Bengals, the Eagles, all these teams that are in front of them. Like I have a lot more confidence in those teams. And then you start to look at some of the teams behind them and like, I arguably can say, I assume that they'll get this, by the time you guys watch this, who knows, the CeeDee Lamb thing may or may not be worked out with the Cow. I assume something gets done. So like, I have fewer questions about the Cowboys and the Dolphins and the Falcons and maybe even the Rams and Jets than I even do about the Packers, just strictly based off of the sample size stuff that we talked about and how this offense is going to run. So I am not a Packer hater. I'm not a Jordan Love hater. It's just the price attached to them with the question marks that I still have just makes a lot of these bets unbettable for me.
Yeah, and for me, I thought I was going to come on this pod and be ready to pull the trigger to bet the Packers to win the Super Bowl. I really did. And then I started digging, and I did not feel good about the defense. I don't feel anywhere near as good about the offensive line as I do Detroit's offensive line. And the only reason the Packers are 18-1 is because they're in the NFC. You can't tell me that their rating right now should be better than the Jets, who are 20-1, the Dolphins, who are 25-1. It's just a product of them being in the conference. Like even Packers at 18-1 or Rams at 30-1. Like that, which is the better value there? So I think for me, when it comes to this team, if I'm looking long term at potential situations with a futures ticket when you get to the postseason, Matt, until the NFL changes its archaic playoff rules where you only play 6 of 17 games in the division, but if you don't win the division, you can't get a home playoff game. Like the Lions play 14 of 17 games in a dome, and they have the number 1 offensive line. Like they have the easiest track, in my opinion, to win that division and possibly be the number 1 seed in the conference. Yeah. So at that point in the postseason, are you going to feel better about holding a Lions ticket from 12-1 in the preseason where you're potentially going to be able to middle in playoff games because they're going to be like touchdown favorites or field goal favorites against the upper echelon of the NFC? Or are you going to feel better holding an 18-1 ticket on the Packers where they're going to be probably underdogs in 3 of those playoff games?
Yeah, you just look and the Packers fall into the kind of same situation as the Bills, and which is like the amount of home field advantage you would get in the playoffs playing in a place that really nobody wants to go to because of what's going on from a weather situation. Like, yeah, certainly the Lions want to play at home in the Dome. We get all of that, but it's like, that's not super intimidating for another team coming in, right? They're like, oh, we get to play in a dome too. Like, I'll take perfect conditions. Yeah. Everybody would take perfect conditions.
But that works both ways too, Matt. Like we just talked about, the Packers don't seem like they're going to be all that efficient running the ball this year. So in those conditions, it would hurt them too.
Yeah. So it's just like, for me, you know, it's pretty, you laid it out perfectly. Like I don't see them getting that type of advantage in the postseason. So it's kind of really tough to pull the trigger there. The other thing I would want to point out is just like the scheduling quirk, where I have said multiple times, and certainly you'll hear this on all the content we do here on the Lines as well, maybe we should pump the brakes just a tad on the Chicago Bears. I don't know if us coming in and just assuming that a rookie quarterback is going to be able to lead this team to the promised land in year one. I'm not saying he's not going to. I'm a Caleb Williams believer, but in year one, I think might be getting a little too fast. That said, they don't play the Bears till week 11, and they don't play the second game against the Bears until week 18. Caleb Williams will learn a lot in the NFL in 10 weeks of playing in the NFL. It's like you didn't get the rookie quarterback early on, and so there's no denying the talent on the offensive side of the ball for them. There's no denying the receivers. There's no whatever. And so even if the game does take a beat for him to kind of like get it, Stephen, they don't get him until week 11, and then they get him again the last game of the year, right? And like, so it's one of those things where that's even worse, right? You go like Bears, Niners, Dolphins, Lions, and then hell, if you don't even throw the Seahawks in there, there are some people who are higher on the Seahawks than I am. It's a pretty brutal stretch down the other end. And like I said, you close out with the Bears again there in week 18, which you have the maximum amount of exposure for Caleb Williams to have learned the NFL and everything by then. So it's just a deal where I think the schedule might be a little bit harder, even harder than people are giving it credit for. And they already think it's a hard schedule, but I think it might be even harder than people are giving it credit for because of where they play these teams along the way.
Yeah, I have to question the rating based on all the bad quarterbacks they played last year. And, you know, there was weather in that Niner playoff game as well that made it a little quirky. So I think, you know, I'm shocked that I'm done my research for the Packers and coming on here and saying I don't think I'd bet the over on the win total, even though they're not 3-point dogs or more in any of their games. I just think that the rating may be wrong going into the year, and I want to take a game-by-game approach with this team. And I think the thing I'm most interested in with the Packers from a betting standpoint is potentially just overs in their game, because we know the offense can be elite and the defense might give up a lot of points still.
I'll tell you this, and it's the same thing we say, you know, all the time. This is one of those teams, though. If you like the over, you got to bet it now, because they very well could start out 0-1, and yeah, you maybe will get a little bit better of a deal, but then they're going to go 5-1 most likely after that. And then the other problem too is, Steve, if they mess around and beat the Eagles in week 1, then you're dead to any over number. You're dead to anything you're going to get on the Packers team.
Yeah,
so
they might. I'm not sure about the Eagles yet. I got to dig on them a little bit more, but I'm not sure about the Eagles.
Yeah. So it's a preseason over bet for this team, and it is an in-season under bet for this team, because you might be heading into that week 7 game with a 5-1 Packers team that you can come in and pound the under on, where this schedule gets much more difficult. Texans, Jags, Lions, Bears, Niners, Dolphins, Lions, again, all in a row. And then who knows what Seattle is going to be? Who knows what the Bears look like in week 18? Like, there's a lot of stuff that you really kind of start to pick apart this team starting in week 7. So again, over team early in the season, under team well into the season.
Yeah, in terms of the win total. And week to week, I'm going to be looking at the over in terms of total points in their games to see where they're being lined.
Guys, everything we do, absolutely free. So go ahead and hit that subscribe button below. Give us a thumbs up as well. And then let us know in the comments section, how do you think the Packers are going to do this year? Don't say I'm a Packer hater in those comments. I'm not a Packer hater. I'm just saying there's questions, and it's questions enough to where I want to pump the brakes on making some preseason bets on this team. That's all there is to it. The odds just don't dictate what I think that the question marks come to. So you can follow Stephen on the Twitter machine. You can follow me on the Twitter machine. Of course, ask us any questions down in the comments below. We'll answer everything that we can. Everything we do, absolutely free. So lines.com, upper right-hand corner is the Discord where you can continue this discussion as well. And that, too, is free. For Stephen, I'm Matt. Good luck on all your Packers bets.